Now, at the next stage, when you're recording, you have some options. It really depends on your style and what kind of content you're covering in your video. But for inexperienced users, for instance, it may be best to record the audio performance first and then match up what's said with the screen recordings and other resources as you go. This is where performance matters. And I often do both simultaneously, especially for software, for instance. And then I supplement the visuals in post-production. But that's my comfort level. I get into the kind of the teaching zone, and I can draw on my teaching experience and experience in front of the camera, and that gets me the best results. But it really depends on what experience and comfort level you have. Some projects make more sense to record separately. I often do that for camera tutorials, for instance, where you can kind of show details, but also be talking about it at the same time. It's easier to record the narration up front and then match up those words with whatever visuals make sense.
Here's the viewfinder. If you're familiar with a viewfinder, rather than the monitor, you can look in here. Make sure to adjust for your eye using the diopter calibration. Now let's look at the inputs and outputs you may be using. Here is XLR 1 and 2.
Ultimately, you need to do whatever gets the best performance from your presenter. Recording voice is a craft that takes a lot of practice, and there's no way to do it well unless the performer can become comfortable and confident. So check out some of the resources that I've posted on this page with advice on getting the best vocal performances, for instance. There's some warm-up exercises and things like that you can try to get comfortable and give the best performance. For instance, to get comfortable, I often record in a quiet, isolated space where I can do as many takes as I need to make sure I get it right. The last thing I need is a live audience, but sometimes people that have experience on the stage, for instance, are the opposite and really require somebody there to give them feedback. But again, you just have to find something that's comfortable for you. If you're recording audio, sometimes it's best to print out the script, but I don't recommend that you directly read the words unless you are a trained actor. Often it'll sound kind of robotic and unnatural, and research suggests that human voices that are kind of moving things through naturally cause the most connection to happen. So just make sure that you are not just reading it in a robotic voice, that you have more going on than that. Keep in mind that it's acting, not reading. So my advice is not to actually memorize the lines. You'll spend the whole time trying to get the words right and make sure you get to every little point instead of focusing on the performance itself. So I read through them in advance. I have them available when I need them. And then I use mostly my own words to get the same ideas across. So don't worry if there's a lot of variation. This will often get the most natural sounding performance, especially from an inexperienced performer or someone with experience teaching. Just make sure that you don't wander off into tangents too often, but that you cover everything in the order and in the detail level that you have written in your script. If you're recording video simultaneously with your voice narration, a teleprompter is often ideal, or you can put some things up on the screen that you can read through. But again, reading it versus acting. If you're screencasting, actually, you can get a second monitor or even a second computer and have the words up on the screen for reference, for instance. I have it up right here in front of me that I can reference as I'm talking to you. In most cases, if you make a mistake, just make sure you take one step back and then continue from a little bit earlier. So if the first part of the recording is good, you don't need to redo it. So, and this is for audio recording, not necessarily for video. So you can find a point to cut a little bit earlier and you can put them together, and the audio recording is very easy to edit that way. This becomes more complicated with simultaneous video recordings, such as this, but can still be done, especially if you have a patch, right? You have something visual you can stick in between cuts, and I highly recommend that you have that. And then you can go back to your research that you did at the script and storyboarding stage and pull that in and put it over any mistakes that you made. But if you want to have a talking head for the entire performance, you're going to have to do it over and over again until you get it exactly right, which is why I recommend for inexperienced users to do the voice narration first and then put visuals over top of it. I recommend that you always record with a better microphone than you have on the laptop. As you can see, I have one here with a nice pop filter. I'll put some recommendations later in a different section, but even a modest microphone will drastically improve how professional the videos seem and sound. I'll also include a video on how to record with an example microphone, such as this one, but you'll need to find information on whichever microphone you plan to use. The most important things for getting good, clean recordings is finding a quiet space, such as a empty room, hopefully something that isn't too resonant and causes too many reflections of the sound or reverb, and setting levels. And I'll have a video about how to set levels a little bit later. For screen recording, first you want to prep your computer for recording by removing any personal or sensitive information and excess files on your desktop. So close any programs that give you notifications, especially email or Slack or anything that's going to pop up with sensitive personal or just distracting information that you don't want in your video. Do a practice run before recording so that it doesn't seem hesitant or you don't miss a cue. But remember, you can always just do it again if you make a mistake. Especially if you've recorded the audio beforehand and you are just matching up the screen recording to the audio recording. Definitely don't settle for close enough, right? This is a major difference between amateur looking and professional looking videos. I recommend pausing between different concepts and leaving the mouse alone. So you can actually cut in between those takes, those pauses, and you can relook at your script or whatever you need to do between it. But then it doesn't look like there's a cut. And then you can keep as much of the pause as you want to increase learning, right? If you move too fast, you need to insert more pauses. Consider what information may be best with screen recording and what you may need to record with a webcam. If you're explaining the reasoning behind something, for instance, we probably don't need to see your desktop for these 4 minutes, right? We may want to see a human face to connect with, especially if there's nothing to demonstrate the audio. And then consider the best visualization for your narration. So that could mean a lot of different things, not necessarily just a screen capture. So again, introducing other visuals, other types of screen captures, not just a mouse not moving with a screen there forever. For your webcam and talking head portions, consider buying a better camera. The built-in webcam on any computer is functional, but it's not exactly ideal. So I'll provide a section on recommendations a little later in the course, but keep in mind that a better webcam will go a long way. However, you may want to consider not using a webcam at all. Webcams are designed mostly around video conferencing with the goal of getting a legible image in all situations. So in order to do that, they sacrifice image quality and fidelity, and they constantly adjust exposure in case the lighting conditions change. So you'll notice that this produces chunky, kind of flat images with changing brightness or flicker, for instance. And this makes them potentially distracting and overall an eyesore. They don't look very professional. So if you want a professional image through your videos, record with something higher quality. For instance, I have over here a Canon Vixia, which is one of my recommendations that I'll provide later, rather than the webcam that I have on my camera. But I'll show you an example of each. The downside to having an external camera, though, is the need to sync up the audio and video in post, which adds an extra technically complex sort of step in the post-production process, in the editing process. So again, check out my camera recommendations later in the course, but keep in mind that the more advanced they go, the more complicated it might be in terms of your editing process. So you may consider just getting a better webcam.